Hi, it's Kevin Wright here, back with another property finance tip. And what are we going to be talking about this week? Well, mixed use properties and how you finance those. Mixed use, so part commercial, part resi. So stick around and let's drill down into the detail of mixed use properties. So, mixed use properties, part commercial, part resi. Usually the commercial is on the ground floor, usually it's a shop or an office, and usually it's got a flat or flats on the upper story or stories. So how do you finance these? Well, here's the point. You can't use standard buy-to-let mortgage lenders. Why? Because they don't lend on commercial premises. So you need to use a different type of lender, and typically you're going to need to use commercial lenders. So commercial lenders have a different tick box structure to buy-to-let lenders. So what you look like to a buy-to-let lender and what's acceptable to a buy-to-let lender is not necessarily acceptable to a commercial lender. So let's look at you first before we look at the property. So if you want to get into mixed use properties, what have you got to look like as an investor? Well, in a word, experienced. So you need to have been already renting out property as a landlord for usually a minimum of 12 months. Some lenders longer than that, but usually a minimum of 12 months at least. So commercial lenders like landlords that have tried it, like it, want to keep doing it. They don't really mind whether you're full-time or part-time. If you're part-time, that's okay. If you're full-time, they're very happy with that too. And that's another thing that stands them out from buy-to-let lenders who just hate full-time landlords. So what about the property itself? Well, here's a big difference. Standard residential properties and normal buy-to-let lenders, they don't mind whether the property is vacant or tenanted at the point you buy it. In fact, in some cases with some lenders, they actually prefer it if you're buying a vacant property and you subsequently tenant it rather than taking over a property with a tenant already in it. That's not how it works with commercial lenders. Commercial lenders want it tenanted before they'll lend, or at the very least a tenancy agreement signed even if the tenant isn't actually in there. And this is whether it's a residential tenant or a commercial tenant. So if the commercial part of your property, or even both parts of your mixed-use property, are not currently tenanted, that's a big barrier because commercial lenders aren't going to lend to you. So you either need to buy it with cash, and that can be your cash or someone else's cash, or you need to use bridging finance and buy it, then tenant it, and then get a mortgage on it, and get a commercial mortgage on your mixed use. So if the attitude to it being vacant is different, the attitude to valuing it is also different. Now here's where it differs from residential again, because if you've got a vacant residential property or a tenanted residential property, then there's no real discernible difference in the value. You know, it's got a bricks and mortar value. Okay, there are HMOs, some HMOs are valued slightly differently, but essentially it's a bricks and mortar value. And empty, tenanted makes no difference. That's not the case with commercial property or semi-commercial property. So the value is different whether it's tenanted or whether it's vacant. If it's vacant, it's valued as what is termed as vacant possession value. Now, get a tenant in there and the value rises. So a quick way to get a commercial property to be worth more than you bought it for, if it was vacant, is to put a tenant in there. That'll increase the value. And commercial premises on commercial leases of 3, 5, 10 or even longer years, they're valued as a multiple of the rental income. Also because they're on a fully repairing lease. In other words, it's the tenant's responsibility with commercial property to increase the value, to maintain the property and maintain its value, whereas with residential, it's you, the landlord. So that's another big difference. So the value of a property on commercial can increase if you get a tenant in there. In fact, the quality of the tenant can increase it still more. So if you have a single sole trader business in your shop, or you have a Costa Coffee chain, then they're not, even if the rent is the same, they're not going to be valued the same, because your national chain tenant is deemed to be a much better acquisition for you to rent it out. So you get a much higher value if you get what's called a grade A tenant in there. So that gives you some idea about mixed use properties. It wouldn't be your first foray into property investing, and you need to understand the differences between how it's valued and how it's mortgaged to understand the best way to finance it. So it's going to pay you to understand the different way that it's valued and the different ways you can finance it, depending on whether it's tenanted or empty. That's my tip for this week. So hopefully you've enjoyed that, and hey, don't scoot off just yet, because I've got something else that might be of interest to you. So hang around. If you enjoyed watching this video, did you know every Monday morning at 8:30 I do a live Facebook Q&A. So if you want to start the week with checking out some answers to your property finance questions, click the link here.